I never thought I'd say this, but getting ready to go out on a date now feels like preparing for a marathon. Not the fun kind with cheering crowds, but the kind where every step weighs you down a little more. When I was in my early 20s, I could wake up with just enough time to throw on a cute outfit, slap on some light makeup, and be out the door feeling excited and unstoppable. There was this buzzing energy inside me, a mix of hope, curiosity, and the thrill of possibility. Every date was a chance to meet someone new, to start a story, to laugh and maybe even fall in love. But now, at 38, it's a different story. The moment I think about getting ready, my heart sinks just a little. Picking out an outfit feels like a chore. I stare at my closet, scanning racks of clothes that once made me feel confident but now just feel tired. Nothing seems quite right. Should I go casual and risk looking like I don't care? Or dress up and feel like I'm trying too hard? Then there's the makeup. I remember when a quick swipe of mascara was all I needed. Now, I have to think about foundation that actually covers the fine lines and uneven tone, concealer for those stubborn dark circles, and every little detail that no one talks about when you're young. Sometimes I spend an hour just in front of the mirror, trying to recreate that flawless look I see on Instagram, but it always feels like I'm missing something. It's exhausting, physically and mentally. And the truth is, it's not just about looking good. It's about the mental energy of trying to be ready to put myself out there, ready to be vulnerable, ready to hope without knowing if it will pay off. Some nights, I wonder if I'm fooling myself by even trying. Is all this effort worth it? To get dressed up, feel nervous, and then maybe walk away disappointed? Or worse, ignored? I catch myself thinking about the hour I just spent getting ready. Was it time well spent? Or was it a slow drain on my spirit? Because the reality is, dating in your late 30s feels different. It's no longer just about fun or excitement, it's layered with doubt, exhaustion, and a quiet fear that maybe, just maybe, this chapter is harder to write than the ones before. But still, I push myself. Because deep down, I want to believe that the story isn't over. That there's still a chance for connection, for laughter, for something real. So I take a deep breath, grab my purse, and step out the door, hoping the energy I once had is just hiding, waiting for me to find it again. Walking out the door doesn't magically erase the fatigue. In fact, sometimes it feels like the real work begins the moment you leave your safe little bubble at home. I've learned the hard way that dating after 35 isn't like the movies. There's no carefree laughter in crowded clubs, no whirlwind romances sparked by a chance encounter. It's quieter, almost painfully so, and filled with an invisible weight. There's pressure, too. From everywhere. From friends who ask if I'm seeing anyone, from family who hint that maybe it's time to settle down, from social media where everyone's posting pictures of perfect relationships that seem so effortless. It feels like a constant reminder that I should be doing something, anything, to fix this waiting game I'm stuck in. And then there are my own expectations. I want to meet someone who respects me, who values me for more than just a pretty face or a fun night out. Someone who understands that I'm not a 20-year-old with endless time and energy. Someone who sees my stories, my struggles, my strength, and still wants to be by my side. But that's not what dating looks like right now. I've been on dates where the guy barely listens, checking his phone more than he looks at me. I've been in conversations where I'm the one doing all the talking, trying desperately to make a connection that feels one-sided. And I've experienced the awkward silences, the ones that scream louder than words, when it's clear the chemistry just isn't there. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if it's me. Am I too much? Too guarded? Or maybe not enough? It's a strange, lonely place to be, caught between hoping for love and doubting your own worth. And then there's the effort. The constant effort to appear interested when you're exhausted. The rehearsed smiles, the polite questions, the subtle nods when all you want is to be seen, truly seen, for who you are. I remember one night not long ago. I was sitting across from a man who seemed kind enough, but I felt nothing. No spark, no laughter, no shared dreams. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family, all the usual questions, but his eyes were distant, distracted. After the third awkward pause, I realized something: I was dating ghosts. Men who were physically present but emotionally checked out. And maybe, deep down, I was doing the same. It's exhausting pretending. Exhausting hoping. Exhausting believing that maybe, just maybe, this time it will be different. But here's the truth, even in the exhaustion, I still want to believe. I still want to believe that somewhere out there, there's a man who will look at me and see me. Not just the surface, not just the pretty packaging, but the real me. So I keep trying. I keep showing up. Because what's the alternative? Giving up? Closing the door on a future that I still want? No. Not yet. There's a quiet courage in this kind of hope, the kind that doesn't roar but whispers. And maybe, just maybe, that whisper is loud enough to find someone who's listening. Some days, the hardest battle isn't the one you fight with someone else. It's the one inside your own mind. After so many dates that feel like déjà vu, after so many moments where I'm left wondering, did I do something wrong, or why didn't he call back, it's easy to start doubting yourself. To wonder if the problem isn't the dating scene but me. There's a quiet loneliness in that doubt. It creeps in between the cracks of your smile and settles deep in your chest. It whispers questions I'm scared to answer out loud. Am I enough? Am I too much? Will I ever be what someone wants? I try to shake those thoughts off, but they linger, like shadows you can't quite outrun. Some nights, I sit alone in my apartment and scroll through dating apps, feeling like I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. Profiles blur together, generic pictures, cliches about loving adventure and good food. I wonder if the men behind those screens are really there, or if they're just ghosts like the ones I met in person. It's exhausting, but what's worse is the feeling of invisibility. The sense that, no matter how much effort I put in, the hours getting ready, the careful conversations, the hopeful smiles, I still don't stand out. Like I'm shouting in a crowded room, but no one hears me. And yet, I keep showing up. Because giving up feels like losing a part of myself. Like admitting defeat in a fight I wasn't ready to have. I remind myself of the things I love, the quiet mornings with coffee, the books that transport me to other worlds, the laughter of friends who know me. Those moments keep me grounded when the dating world feels overwhelming. I also remind myself that I'm more than a date, more than a checklist of qualities. I'm a woman with dreams, scars, hopes, and fears. I deserve someone who sees all of that and still chooses me. It's a slow journey, sometimes frustrating, sometimes painful, but I hold on to the hope that it will lead me somewhere worth the struggle. Because in the end, this invisible battle is about more than just dating. It's about learning to love myself enough to wait for someone who truly deserves me. Dating in your late 30s isn't just about finding someone, it's about carrying the weight of years of hopes, disappointments, and what feels like an invisible clock ticking louder every day. I remember my friend Sarah once told me, at our age, it's not just about love anymore. It's about timing, security, and whether someone can meet you where you are. And she was right. It's not just the first date nerves anymore. It's the deep anxiety of wondering if this person can accept all the layers you've built, the past relationships, the career struggles, the dreams you've chased, and the ones you've put on hold. There's a pressure to appear put together, confident, and ready. But inside, sometimes I feel like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. Unsure if anyone could ever see the whole picture and still want it. Sometimes I ask myself, am I asking too much? Do I expect too much? Or is it just that the world expects too much from women like me, successful, independent, but still longing for connection? The hardest part is how much effort it takes just to show up. The hours getting ready, the makeup, the outfit, the mental prep, all for a chance that maybe this time it'll be different. And often, it isn't. There have been dates where the man barely listens, where conversations feel like interviews, where I'm left thinking, was I invisible again? Other times, it's worse, when the man seems interested but then disappears, ghosting without explanation. That silent rejection cuts deeper than words ever could. I'm learning that part of this process is about protecting myself. Not getting too invested too fast. Holding back my heart until I'm sure the other person isn't just another shadow. It's exhausting, but I remind myself that my value isn't tied to their interest. Still, some nights I lie awake wondering if I'm setting my standards too high or if I'm just tired of the game. I want someone who sees me, not just my resume, my photos, or my social media presence, but the real me. Maybe that person is out there. Maybe not yet. For now, I keep going. One date at a time. One small hope at a time. Because the weight of expectations can feel heavy, but it's nothing compared to the weight of giving up. After a while, I started noticing a pattern, not just in myself, but in almost every woman I met in the dating scene. We all wear masks. Not literal ones, but emotional masks carefully crafted to protect us from getting hurt. There's the mask of confidence, the smile that hides the loneliness, the laughter that covers the doubt. The mask of independence, I don't need anyone, we say, even when we crave connection more than anything. And the mask of perfection, the flawless makeup, the carefully chosen outfit, the curated social media posts that show just the highlight reel of our lives. It's exhausting, keeping up appearances. I remember one night after a date, I sat in my car alone, the city lights blurred through my tears. I felt so tired of pretending. What if I didn't have to be perfect? What if I could just be myself, flaws, fears, all? But then I wondered, would anyone want me then? It's a question many of us ask in silence. Because vulnerability feels risky. I started talking to some women close to me, and they admitted they felt the same. That behind the Instagram posts and perfect selfies, they too felt lonely, tired, and sometimes invisible. It was a strange relief to know I wasn't alone. But it didn't make the dating world any easier. It made me realize, the real struggle isn't just finding the right person, but letting them see the real you. And that's a journey all on its own. As the weeks went by, I found myself tangled in a web of expectations, not just from the men I met, but from myself. There was this invisible checklist playing on repeat in my head. Be confident, but not arrogant. Be independent, but not distant. Be fun, but not desperate. Be attractive, but not flashy. I realized the hardest part wasn't the actual dating, it was constantly second-guessing every move, every word, every outfit. One afternoon, I met up with my friend Lila for coffee. She's been through her own heartbreaks and battles with self-worth. We talked about how exhausting it is to perform all the time, to be uneven when we're drained. Lila told me something that stuck with me: they don't want you to be real. They want a fantasy. But you can't live in a fantasy forever. It hit me hard. The men I met seemed to chase illusions, beautiful images and stories that faded when reality showed up. I wondered if I was doing the same, trying to fit into a mold I thought men wanted. That night, I looked in the mirror longer than usual, peeling back the layers of makeup, the fake smile, the forced confidence. I saw a woman tired of pretending. A woman longing to be seen and loved for who she really was. But also a woman scared to let that happen. Because what if letting go meant losing everything? The more I tried to show up as perfect, the more I felt like I was disappearing. Every text unanswered, every date cancelled last minute chipped away at my confidence. It wasn't just rejection, it was a slow erasure of my sense of worth. One evening, after a particularly draining day, I sat alone in my small apartment, scrolling through messages from guys I thought were interested. Silent bubbles stared back at me, read but no reply. I kept wondering, why am I here, doing all this? Dressing up, planning conversations, trying to be someone I thought they'd want? My phone buzzed. It was Lila again. Hey, are you okay? You seem off. I typed back, honestly, I'm tired. Like really tired. She replied instantly, you don't have to pretend with me. I see you. For the first time, I let myself admit it. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was emotional and mental. The next day, I started writing down how I felt, trying to understand what I wanted, not what I thought I should want. That night, I faced a truth I hadn't been ready for: maybe I'd been chasing the wrong thing all along. Maybe the problem wasn't that men don't want women like me. Maybe it was that I wasn't ready to want myself. The days after I wrote those words, something shifted inside me. I stopped scrolling endlessly through dating apps. I stopped tailoring every outfit or every word to please someone else. Instead, I started saying yes to myself. I reconnected with old friends who never judged me, just held space. I picked up painting again, something I'd loved before the noise of dating drowned it out. I treated myself to quiet mornings with coffee and a book, not worrying about who might call or text. The loneliness didn't vanish overnight. But slowly, it softened. And with that softness came clarity. I realized I don't need to fit anyone's ideal, not society's, not the dating world's, not even my own old expectations. I am enough, just as I am. Men will come and go. But this, the connection I'm building with myself, is the foundation for everything else. It's not about finding the one. It's about being the one for me. And that feels like the most powerful kind of love there is. The silence in my apartment was loud, the kind of silence that makes you hear every breath you take, every thought you try to hide. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out the window at the city lights flickering in the distance, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and emptiness. It was late, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, my mind took me back to all the places I'd been, not just physically, but emotionally. I thought about the years I'd spent chasing after love, or at least what I thought love was supposed to look like. The dinners I prepared, the texts I sent, the smiles I forced, all meant to hide the truth that I was terrified of being alone. Alone not just in the sense of being single, but truly alone with myself. Growing up, love was complicated. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, the constant hope she had that the right man would come and fix everything. I remember her tears after arguments, the way she'd mask hurt with laughter when guests came over. It was a script I'd memorized without realizing it, a blueprint of how women were supposed to survive. Be desirable. Be accommodating. Be invisible when needed. I wanted to break that cycle. I thought I was strong, independent. But deep down, I was scared that if I wasn't perfect, if I didn't look a certain way or say the right things, I would be left behind. That I wasn't enough. So I learned to perform. To adjust my smile to what I thought men wanted. To soften my voice when I was angry. To laugh at jokes that didn't land. I chased approval like it was oxygen, always hoping, always waiting for someone to see the real me, not the polished version. But that real me was buried under layers of fear and doubt. And each time I thought I found someone who could love that real me, I ended up shattered, wondering if the problem was me or just bad luck. There was the time I stayed with Jason even though he barely noticed me, just because I was afraid of being alone. Or when I ignored red flags with Marcus because his attention made me feel valuable. Even if only for a moment. The dates that felt like auditions, the conversations where I said what I thought they wanted to hear instead of what I felt. It was exhausting, and yet I kept doing it. Because what else was there? What else was I supposed to do when your whole world has been shaped around pleasing others? Now, as I sat in that quiet apartment, I realized that those old wounds weren't just scars from past loves. They were chains I had wrapped around myself, holding me back from truly living. And maybe that was the hardest part to admit. That the fear I carried wasn't just about being alone with someone else. It was about being alone with myself. I took a deep breath and whispered to the empty room, I don't want to run anymore. It was the first honest thing I had said in a long time. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room. I woke up feeling strangely hollow but also somehow lighter, as if the act of finally admitting my fears the night before had loosened some invisible weight. I lay there for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city waking up, and tried to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to dive back into distraction, scroll through my phone, check messages, maybe even reach out to someone just to feel connected, even if only superficially. But another part, the quieter, more honest part, whispered that it was time to look deeper. I forced myself out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, where the ritual of making coffee helped ground me. The aroma filled the air, familiar and comforting, a small anchor in the sea of uncertainty. I sat down with my cup, hands wrapped around the warmth, and let my thoughts roam freely. I thought about all the times I had blamed others, the men who disappeared without explanation, the friends who let me down, the world that seemed to expect so much from a woman like me. But beneath all of that, I started to see a different truth. It wasn't just about them. It was also about me, about the choices I had made, the ways I had protected myself, and the parts of myself I had refused to face. For so long, I had been searching for validation in the wrong places, trying to fill a hole that no one else could fix. I was the one who had to learn how to sit with my own company, to be my own best friend, and to find peace in solitude. The idea scared me. It still does. I remembered a conversation I had with my sister years ago, when she told me, "You have to love yourself first, Maya. Otherwise, how can you expect anyone else to?" At the time, it felt like a cliché, something easy to say but impossible to live. But now, in the quiet of my apartment, those words echoed with new meaning. I realized that learning to love myself wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about having a flawless life or being endlessly confident. It was about accepting the messy, imperfect parts, the doubts, the fears, the mistakes, and still choosing to show up for myself every day. That morning, I decided to take a small step. I opened a notebook I had bought months ago but never used. The pages were blank, waiting. I wrote down a promise to myself, to be honest, to be kind, to take my time. And then, for the first time in a long time, I started writing, not about what I thought others wanted to hear, but about what I really felt. About the loneliness, the hope, the pain, and the strength I was beginning to find inside. It wasn't easy. Some days, the words came out messy and tangled, like the thoughts in my head. Other days, I wrote with clarity and purpose. But every time, I felt a little lighter, a little more real. In that notebook, I began to rewrite my story, not the version I had told myself for years, but the one that was truly mine. And with each page, I could feel myself healing. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I went through the motions, work, errands, small talks with friends, but inside, something had shifted. It was as if a door had opened, letting in a breeze that unsettled everything, yet also freshened the stale air I had been breathing for so long. I started avoiding my phone more intentionally. The constant ping of messages and social media notifications used to feel like lifelines, but now they felt like chains, reminders of connections that weren't real, conversations that were shallow, moments lost to screens instead of being present. I wanted silence. Real silence. But silence is not always peaceful. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it presses on your chest like an invisible weight that you can't shake off. On one particularly quiet evening, I found myself sitting on the floor of my living room, legs crossed, eyes closed, trying to breathe deeply. The silence was loud. It forced me to hear the thoughts I had been running from, the insecurities, the regrets, the questions that had no easy answers. Why did I let myself believe it would be different this time? Why did I ignore the red flags? What does it say about me that I'm still here, holding on to something broken? Tears welled up and spilled over, and I didn't fight them. For once, I let myself feel the sadness without guilt or shame. I cried for the lost time, for the shattered trust, for the loneliness that felt so acute it was almost physical. But beneath the sadness, something else began to rise, a quiet determination. I realized I had been living in survival mode for too long. Reacting to pain, protecting myself from hurt, numbing emotions with distractions. But now, I wanted more. I wanted to live, not just exist. That night, I wrote again in my notebook, pouring out everything I had been too scared to say aloud. I wrote about the loneliness, the exhaustion, the fear of never being enough. But I also wrote about the small moments of joy I had almost forgotten, the warmth of the sun on my face during a morning walk, the laughter shared with a friend, the comfort of my favorite book in my hands. I wrote about hope. Not the kind that promises a perfect ending, but the kind that whispers, "Keep going. You're not alone." The next morning, I woke up with a fragile sense of peace. It wasn't magic. The pain hadn't disappeared. But it was quieter now, softened by the act of acknowledging it. I started to notice things differently. The way my favorite cafe smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon. The way the city streets looked golden in the late afternoon light. The way a stranger smiled kindly in passing, reminding me that kindness still existed. I began reaching out to old friends, not with the expectation of fixing everything but just to reconnect. Some answered, some didn't. And that was okay. I was learning that people come and go, but what mattered was the connection to myself. One afternoon, I decided to take a spontaneous trip to the park. I sat on a bench, watching families and couples, the laughter of children echoing around me. I felt a pang, a mix of longing and acceptance. I wanted love. I wanted partnership. But I also wanted to be whole on my own. The hardest part was realizing that waiting for someone else to fill the emptiness wasn't the answer. The answer was to become whole, to build a life that felt meaningful regardless of who was by my side. That evening, as I flipped through my notebook, I paused at a page I had written just days before. I am enough. Even when I'm tired. Even when I'm scared. Even when I feel alone. It was a small declaration, but it felt revolutionary. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, one imperfect, beautiful step at a time. The mornings came slower now, as if the world itself was urging me to take my time, to breathe, to feel, to live deliberately instead of just surviving. I started waking up before the sun, a quiet ritual that became sacred to me. There was something about the stillness of early morning, the soft hush before the city stirred, that made me feel like I had a moment reclaimed just for myself. I would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the first light touch the rooftops, and in those moments, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. But rebuilding isn't a straight path. It's messy. It's uneven. Some days, I was full of hope, convinced I could reclaim my life. Other days, doubts crept in like shadows, whispering old fears: "You're too broken. Who would want you now?" To face those doubts, I started therapy. At first, the idea terrified me. Sitting with a stranger, unpacking the rawest parts of my life, felt vulnerable beyond words. But slowly, the sessions became a lifeline. The therapist, Dr. Ellis, didn't offer quick fixes or platitudes. Instead, she asked the hard questions and held space for my messy, complicated truth. "You're doing the work," she said one day. "Healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about learning to live with it without letting it define you." That hit me. I had been trying to erase my past, the betrayals, the disappointments, as if wiping a slate clean would give me a fresh start. But real healing meant carrying those experiences with me, like scars that told my story, not shame that buried my worth. At work, I began to see changes too. I had always been dedicated but guarded, keeping my professional life separate from my personal struggles. Now, I found myself more open with colleagues, sharing bits of my journey, allowing others to see the real me beneath the polished exterior. Some responded with warmth and support. Others didn't know what to say, but that was okay. What mattered was that I was stepping out of my shell, embracing vulnerability not as weakness, but as strength. One evening, I met a group of women at a local book club. They were diverse, different ages, backgrounds, and stories, but what united us was our shared search for meaning, connection, and healing. Their courage inspired me. Listening to their stories made mine feel less isolating. We talked about everything: heartbreak, career struggles, motherhood, dreams deferred, and the messy beauty of life. For the first time in years, I felt part of a tribe, a community where I could be seen and heard without judgment. But even as I built these new bridges, I grappled with loneliness. The kind that settles deep in your bones, reminding you that no matter how many people surround you, the space inside only you can fill. I started journaling more, not just about my feelings, but about my dreams, the life I wanted to create. I wrote about the kind of love I longed for, the woman I aspired to be, and the legacy I wished to leave. Sometimes, I wrote letters to my younger self, words of comfort and wisdom, telling her she was brave and worthy even when she felt lost. Those letters became a balm, healing the wounds that time hadn't yet erased. The nights were still hardest. When the world quieted, and the shadows stretched long, old memories would surface uninvited. I learned to face those moments without running away. I lit candles, played soft music, and allowed myself to cry. Tears became not a sign of defeat but a release, a way to let go of pain that no longer served me. Gradually, I noticed shifts in how I saw myself. The mirror reflected not just a woman who had been hurt but a woman who had survived. A woman who was learning to love herself again, piece by piece. One afternoon, as I walked through a park bursting with spring blooms, I realized I no longer dreaded being alone. Instead, I cherished the freedom it gave me, the chance to explore who I was without compromise. I was no longer waiting for someone else to define my happiness. I was beginning to define it for myself. That realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Because building a new life meant opening the door to unknown possibilities, some joyful, some painful, but all mine to embrace. and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step through that door. After months of steady rebuilding, I found myself standing at a crossroads I hadn't anticipated, the possibility of opening my heart again. The thought both excited and terrified me, like stepping onto a tightrope stretched thin between hope and fear. One afternoon, a friend convinced me to join a small gathering, just casual, nothing serious. At first, I hesitated. Was I ready? Could I trust myself to navigate this new terrain without falling back into old patterns? But something inside whispered. Try. For yourself. So I went. The room was filled with faces I didn't know, some familiar smiles, some strangers whose eyes held stories like mine. I felt awkward at first, the way you do when re-entering a world that had once felt so natural but now seemed foreign. A man approached me. His name was Ethan. He wasn't flashy or overly confident, just quietly kind, with a warmth that made the space between us feel safe. We talked about simple things at first, books, music, the weather. No pressure, no expectations. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to be curious instead of guarded. But the old fears lurked beneath the surface. Would I be able to trust? Would this end in disappointment? Could I protect my heart this time? Ethan didn't rush me. He respected the pace I needed, never pushing, always listening. That patience felt like a balm on wounds I hadn't realized were still raw. Slowly, I began to share pieces of my story, carefully, cautiously. Each time, I held my breath, waiting for judgment or rejection. Instead, he met my truth with empathy and understanding. That was new. But even as I allowed myself to hope, I reminded myself to stay grounded. This was a new chapter, not a rewrite of the past. I was no longer the same woman who had endured betrayal and loss. I was stronger, wiser, more aware of my worth. Navigating this tentative connection taught me patience, with others, but most importantly, with myself. I learned that healing doesn't mean erasing the past but making peace with it, so it no longer controls the present. There were still moments of doubt and loneliness, days when I questioned if I was ready to be seen again. But I met those moments with kindness instead of criticism. I was learning to hold space for all parts of myself, the wounded and the hopeful, the scared and the brave. And as spring turned to summer, I realized something profound. The journey wasn't just about finding love with someone else, but rediscovering love for myself. That was the beginning of everything. The days with Ethan unfolded gently, like the soft unfolding of a flower petal, slow, deliberate, and full of quiet promise. Every conversation was a thread weaving a new tapestry of connection, but underneath it all, I could feel the fragile tension between hope and hesitation. There was a delicate dance happening inside me. On one side, a part of me wanted to dive in headfirst, to believe in the possibility of something real, something lasting. On the other, a cautious voice whispered warnings, reminders of past pain, of the walls I'd built to keep myself safe. One afternoon, Ethan and I took a walk through a small park near my apartment. The air was warm, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine, and the sunlight filtered softly through the trees. We talked about everything and nothing, books, music, the small quirks of daily life. At one point, I glanced at him and saw a vulnerability in his eyes that mirrored my own. I'm not used to this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Trusting someone again feels complicated. He smiled, a quiet understanding in his gaze. It's complicated for me too. But I think the fact that we're aware of it means we can take it slow. No pressure. No rush. That moment, that simple exchange, felt like a breath of fresh air. For so long, I had feared rushing into love would only lead to heartbreak. But here was someone willing to move at a pace that felt safe, that honored my history and my healing. Yet, even as I felt hopeful, old fears lingered. What if I let my guard down and it all fell apart? What if the past repeated itself in new and unexpected ways? I reminded myself that healing was not linear. Some days, I would feel strong and open, others, guarded and unsure. That's when I began journaling again, not just to track my thoughts, but to confront my fears. Writing became a mirror, reflecting back my insecurities and my courage. Each entry was a step toward clarity. I realized that trust, like love, had to be earned, and that included trusting myself to recognize when to hold on and when to let go. Ethan didn't have all the answers. Nor did I. But together, we were exploring what it meant to build something new from the fragments of the past. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility. And that was enough. After that afternoon in the park, a subtle shift began to happen inside me. Ethan's quiet patience was like a balm I hadn't known I needed. Still, every smile and every shared secret seemed to carry the weight of all my past wounds, like invisible chains I was slowly learning to loosen. I remember one evening in particular. We sat on my tiny balcony, the city lights blinking softly around us, and I felt a sudden rush of anxiety. The comfort of his presence was shadowed by the ghost of my fears, the ones that told me I wasn't worthy, that love was always just out of reach, that I'd be left alone again. "I'm scared," I said suddenly, my voice trembling. Ethan reached out, gently taking my hand in his. "It's okay to be scared, Maya. I'm scared too. But we don't have to face it alone." That moment, simple but profound, cracked open a door I had kept firmly shut for years. It wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing, it was about showing up, being honest, and choosing each other despite the fear. Still, vulnerability was exhausting. There were days when I wanted to retreat into the safety of solitude, to avoid the messiness of emotions. The fight between my desire for connection and my instinct for self-protection played out in small ways, hesitating before a text, replaying conversations in my mind, wondering if I was moving too fast or not fast enough. Ethan never pushed. Instead, he mirrored my pace, matching my hesitations with understanding, my silence with gentle encouragement. I began to notice the small things. The way he remembered how I took my coffee, how he left me a note on my door that said, "Thinking of you," or how he listened, really listened, when I spoke about my dreams and doubts. It was in these moments that trust began to take root, not as a dramatic breakthrough but as a quiet, steady presence. Yet, trust was not a gift freely given, it was a promise to be earned day by day. And as much as I wanted to believe in us, I knew I had to be patient with myself, to allow time for healing, for growth, for understanding. Because love wasn't about perfection. It was about two imperfect people deciding to face the unknown together. And that was a choice I was finally ready to make. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of our growing connection settled into a gentle, if sometimes uncertain, beat. But inside me, the quiet battle still raged. Trust wasn't a switch I could flip overnight. There were mornings I woke up with a tight knot in my chest, wondering if I was making a mistake. Was I ready to open myself up again? Was Ethan truly different, or was I just rewriting the same old story with a new name? One afternoon, I sat alone in my favorite cafe, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly while the conversations around me blurred into white noise. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan, "Thinking of you." A small smile tugged at my lips, but then doubt crept in. What if I'm rushing? What if I'm still broken? What if he leaves when he realizes I'm not the perfect woman I want him to see? I realized how much my past had woven itself into my present, coloring my perceptions and clouding my hope. Each scar was a whisper in my ear, warning me to protect myself, to keep the walls high. That evening, Ethan noticed the distance in my eyes. We sat in my living room, the hum of the city outside our window like a gentle pulse. "Talk to me," he said softly. I hesitated, then let the words spill out, my fears, my doubts, the ghost of every heartbreak I'd ever endured. He listened without interruption, his hand finding mine across the couch. "You don't have to carry that alone," he said. "I'm here, Maya. Not just for the good days, but for all of it." It wasn't a grand declaration. No promises of forever or flawless love. Just presence. And somehow, that was enough. In that quiet moment, I felt a shift, the fragile beginnings of surrender, of hope. But the path ahead was still uncertain. Healing wasn't linear, and neither was love. It was messy, slow, and often terrifying. Yet, for the first time in a long time, I believed maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. The days after that evening felt different, lighter, somehow. It wasn't that all my fears vanished overnight. They didn't. But I learned that love didn't mean being fearless, it meant choosing to move forward despite the fear. Ethan and I didn't rush into anything dramatic. There were still awkward moments, times when old wounds flared up, and silences filled the spaces between us. But what mattered was that we faced those moments together. One rainy Sunday, we took a long walk through the park, the air crisp and clean after a fresh downpour. We talked about everything, our dreams, our past mistakes, the parts of ourselves we kept hidden. "I'm not perfect," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I've made so many mistakes. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm even worthy of this." Ethan stopped, looked at me with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "Maya, worthiness isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being real." "And you? You're one of the bravest people I know." For the first time, I believed him. I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending everything was okay. It was about embracing every part of myself, the broken, the scared, the hopeful, and letting someone in to see it all without judgment. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, complicated, and imperfect. But it was ours. And sometimes, that's enough. As the sun peeked through the clouds, warming my face, I felt a quiet strength settle in my chest. The future was still unknown, but I was ready to face it. Not with armor or walls, but with an open heart. Because maybe, just maybe, love was worth the risk.